There are those who believe in the existence of a book. A book that contains the most highly guarded secrets of the United States of America. A book whose very existence is known only to a select few. But if such a book exists, what would it contain? Secret conspiracies? Secret plans? Secret lies? Does there really exist America's Book of Secrets? Cannes, the French Riviera, November the 3rd, 2011. President Barack Obama and other international leaders arrived at the 6th meeting of the world's 20 major economies, known as the G20. At recent G20 summits in London, Toronto, and France, thousands had engaged in often violent protests. But why? What were they afraid of? Officially, the members of the G20 meet to discuss, plan, and monitor international economic cooperation. But some claim there is another, more secret reason. Among the protesters were those who believe the group's real intention is to form a single global economically based government, otherwise known as the New World Order. An order directly connected to something even more secret: Freemasonry. For centuries, the Freemasons have been suspected of being the architects behind the world's greatest international conspiracies. Members include titans of industry, visionaries, world leaders, and presidents of the United States.
Freemasonry in the 20th century is sort of a who's who of industry, politics, government. Go into any industry, any branch of government, and you find prominent Freemasons. So Freemasonry is almost like a gallery of American development in the 20th century.
Today, there are an estimated 6 million Freemasons worldwide. And according to some, they are most powerfully rooted in the United States.
14 of 44 U.S. presidents have been Freemasons, including 7 in the 20th century alone. They include William McKinley, Warren Harding, Howard Taft, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and most recently, Gerald Ford.
But who are the Freemasons? And where did they come from?
The origins of Freemasonry are, in many respects, shrouded in mystery. It's probably the only organization in modern life for which that's really true.
Freemasonry is the world's largest, oldest, and best-known gentleman's fraternity. Mythologically, it started during the building of King Solomon's Temple, and maybe even before that.
This is very important because this is where you see the roots, the real roots of modern Freemasonry. The Egyptians were great builders, stone builders. And obviously their 2 greatest achievements in stone building were pyramids and obelisks. It is no coincidence that pyramids and obelisks are used as symbols in the rituals of Freemasonry. Freemason meaning free builder. Here we're not talking anymore only about building structures, physical structures. We're talking about building your own inner temple. So the building concept is very important, and that is why there is strong association with ancient Egypt.
The clearest and plainest origin point for Masonry can be found within the Reformation. In the 1600s, a cluster of academics, merchants, intellectuals, politicians, clergy wanted to get together and discuss civics and religion and social issues and science in an atmosphere that was entirely outside the control or the monitoring of the church or the aristocracy. And to do this could be dangerous. People who stepped outside the accepted order of things, even late into the Enlightenment era, could be persecuted, imprisoned, and in some extreme cases could still be executed.
While the origins of this secret society may forever remain a mystery, in America, the influences of modern Freemasonry began to emerge in the mid-18th century.
Masonry traveled to America on British troop ships. You start to find the first publicly proclaimed Freemasonic lodges in the second decade of the 1700s. And by that point, it's an influential organization.
It is important to keep in mind the 18th century was really the age of enlightenment. Obviously, Freemasonry played a very important role in promoting and propagating ideals and principles of that age. And the founding fathers of the United States were disciples of that age.
The foundation that Freemasonry is built upon is expressed in two symbolic tools: the square and the compass.
The original universal symbol of Freemasonry is a square and compasses. The compasses is the main tool of the individual. You draw a circle using the compasses around you, and if you go beyond the perimeter, you lose control. Now, because it's a compass, the circle can be larger, and how do you enlarge? By seeking knowledge and light. The square is considered a symbol of wisdom, and G stands for the grand architect of the universe.
By the mid-1700s, Freemasons in the American colonies were regularly holding clandestine meetings, assembling in woodland cabins, country barns, rooms above taverns, and anywhere they felt their secrets were safe from the untrustworthy public.
If a man can't be trusted to keep something as minor as a handshake or a password as a secret, then his word really can't be taken as a man or as a gentleman.
As Ben Franklin said, if we don't hang together, we will most assuredly hang separately. So secrecy was important to bind these founding brothers, not just fathers, they were founding brothers, and secrecy bound them together.
But what was being discussed inside the Freemasons' meeting places? Were their lodges functioning as incubators for diabolical plans? Boston, the 16th of December, 1773. Relations between the American colonies and their British rulers had reached breaking point. The Sons of Liberty, a group dedicated to protecting the rights of colonists against British oppression, convened at the Green Dragon Tavern and ignited an infamous act of rebellion, the Boston Tea Party.
Ground zero for the revolution was in Boston at the Green Dragon Tavern, and in the 1760s it was actually bought by St. Andrew's Lodge. So the tavern was actually owned by the lodge.
Paul Revere happened to be the master of his lodge in Boston, which met in the Green Dragon Tavern. By simple coincidence, that's where the Sons of Liberty also met. Interesting.
The Boston Tea Party was planned at the Green Dragon Tavern with lots of men who were members of St. Andrew's Lodge. St. Andrew's Lodge was supposed to meet And as a matter of fact, in their minutes, it actually says meeting called due to lack of quorum because they were out dumping tea into the ocean.
The Boston Tea Party was a protest against taxation and tyranny. But could it have been part of a larger secret agenda? Were the colonial Freemasons really planting the seeds of what would eventually become known as the New World Order?
Masonry was a fundamental part of the American Revolution, and that is because some of America's most influential founders, including Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, were Freemasons.
Freemasonry was very important to George Washington. It was a network that he developed within his command, and he encouraged his generals to become Freemasons. He thought it made them more trustworthy.
33 out of Washington's 74 generals were Freemasons. That's 46%. That's not accidental. There were 9 out of 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence who were Freemasons, so they were well represented. 1/3 of the signers of the Constitution were Freemasons.
One of the main contributors to the Constitution of the United States is also believed to have been America's first Master Mason, Benjamin Franklin.
For my money, the most powerful Masonic influence on America as a whole is Anderson's Constitutions. In 1717, the London Freemasons formed an official lodge, formed a Grand Lodge. They hired a man named James Anderson to write a set of constitutions by which the Freemasons would live. It is startling when you read Anderson's constitutions for the Freemasons, written in 1723. You see concept after concept after concept that appears in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence.
There are those who believe that for as long as the United States has existed, the Freemasonic influence on it has been both pervasive and profound. Some suggest the Freemasons are simply a gentleman's club. Others claim they are a secret government leading America towards a new world order. Perhaps the truth can be found by examining the group's many strange rituals, secret ceremonies that have been hidden from public scrutiny and that its members may be willing to die for.
Some of what goes on behind the doors of a Freemasonic lodge involves rites and ceremonies that are kept secret.
If you tell any of their secrets, they get to cut your throat and hang you by the neck.
Fredericksburg, Virginia, 1752. A young man of 20 is blindfolded. His name is George Washington, and he is about to take the Freemasons' blood oath of secrecy.
His initiation was done very much the way initiations are done now. He was blindfolded, then he was led into the meeting room, knocked on the door 3 times, and when the door was opened, he was received on the point of a sharp instrument against his naked left breast, and then once that was done, he took the obligation at the altar. And then his blindfold was removed, and he finally was allowed to see all the men in his lodge, and they were all pointing their swords right at him, which was to reinforce the obligation that he had taken, that he better not reveal any of the secrets of Freemasonry. Every Masonic lodge is said to be facing the east. There's the letter G that's also in the east over the worshipful master. The initiate is brought to the center of the room where the altar is. There will be a Bible on the altar. When the initiate is brought to the altar, he finally assumes the obligation of his individual degrees. There are 3 degrees: the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master mason.
Masonic rituals have changed little over the last 2 centuries. Upon initiation, each new member swears a lifelong vow to protect the Brotherhood's secrets. A vow that, if broken, could mean death.
What goes on behind the doors of a Freemasonic lodge involves ceremonies in which people will be reminded of the ever-hovering presence of death.
Masonic trials, ritualistic executions. What goes on behind the closed doors of a Masonic lodge may remain a mystery. Mysterious handshakes, secret passwords, passion plays of murder. Are these merely harmless practices, or ancient rituals designed to confuse the uninitiated?
Within Freemasonry, you've got a huge outer circle of membership. They're in there for the fellowship, and then you've got a small inner circle that really is privy to some of the inner secrets. But if you ask a Mason about these 2 circles, he's going to tell you no, because he's either a member of the outer circle or he's a member of the inner circle, and he's taken a blood oath never to reveal that fact.
Inner circles guarding inner secrets. But what information could be so important that Freemasons would risk their lives in order to keep it hidden from outsiders? Perhaps clues may be found by examining the many strange symbols that appear on numerous documents and buildings, and that even feature it's one of the most important documents ever written. It forms the foundation of American government. But while the United States Constitution is written in plain English, there are those who believe that America's founders used Masonic symbols and codes to communicate a secret agenda.
The language of Freemasonry is a language of symbols. Symbols hide universal truth, and the idea is that each individual gets to discover those on his or her own.
Washington was very fond of and drawn to the symbols of Freemasonry. He was proud to be a Freemason. You do have depictions of George Washington, for example, wearing his Masonic apron, and these things are filled with all kinds of occult symbols, the all-seeing eye, the square and compass.
What is the G? G, most people would say, that's God. And it is held between the square and the compass. So therefore, it's central to everything. But it also can be related to geometry, sacred geometry.
To this day, one of America's most recognizable symbols, the Great Seal of the United States, remains shrouded in mystery. In 1934, Freemason and soon-to-be Vice President Henry Wallace submitted a proposal to a fellow Freemason, the United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt, to include the symbol on currency.
Henry Wallace and Franklin Delano Roosevelt were influential in putting the Great Seal of the United States on the dollar bill. Prior to FDR's presidency, the backside of the Great Seal didn't appear on the dollar bill.
You can see this fascination for ancient Egyptian symbols, pyramids. All of these things get repeated in the ideas and symbols and ceremonies of Freemasonry.
Because the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum appears in the Great Seal of the United States, Freemasonry becomes such an element of distrust by those who think that we're about to be replaced by a new world order.
Did the Freemasons use symbology to communicate the existence of a new world order? If so, what other secrets can be found, hiding in plain sight? Washington, D.C., just a mile north of the White House, stands a massive stone building at the corner of 16th and S Street. It is the House of the Temple, a headquarters of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Its members are believed to be part of a lineage that dates back to 16th century Scotland.
The Scottish Rite is what's called an appendant body of Freemasonry. Once you go through the first 3 degrees in a Masonic lodge, you're then eligible to join other organizations within the family of Freemasonry. The Scottish Rite, which has degrees 4 through 33.
This particular location has the address 1733, which represents the 33 degrees of initiation in Scottish Rite Freemasonry.
The big secret is the address actually came out to 1733, even though that isn't actually where it is in the plan of the city, because they wanted 33 as part of the address. 33 appears all over the building.
There are 33 columns around the House of the Temple. Each one of them is 33 feet tall, symbolizing the 33 degrees of initiation in Scottish Rite Freemasonry.
So 33 for centuries has been a sacred number.
The House of the Temple, like all Masonic structures, has many potent symbols incorporated into its design.
Even the steps that I'm walking on are symbolic in number. Down at the street level, we start off with 3 steps, symbolic of the 3 degrees in standard Freemasonry. Then we have 5 steps, which symbolize the 5 orders of architecture and the 5 senses. Then we have 7 steps, symbolizing liberal arts and sciences from medieval times. And finally, here we have an unfinished pyramid atop the House of the Temple. And of course, that's a resonance to the unfinished pyramid on the Great Seal of the United States as well. Should we imagine an all-seeing eye up there? Perhaps we should.
It's actually a copy of the mausoleum in Helicanarsis of King Moslos, which was a burial tomb in one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Buried deep within the House of the Temple lie the remains of a man whom many consider to be one of the most important and controversial figures in Freemasonry, Albert Pike.
He wrote the word Lucifer twice in his book, Morals and Dogma, and he's talking about the origin of the word Lucifer as meaning bringer of light, and saying, isn't it interesting that the term bringer of light came to mean the Prince of Darkness?
Upon his death in 1891, Pike's body was buried at Oak Hill Cemetery in Washington, D.C. 10 years later, a statue was erected in his honor, the only monument in the capital city that commemorates a Confederate officer. In 1944, Pike's body was exhumed and moved to the House of the Temple. But why? Could it have something to do with the strange rites and rituals he wrote about in his book, Morals and Dogma? Or did Pike's references to Lucifer suggest that the Freemasons have another, more ominous agenda? Perhaps the answer can be found by examining the public buildings and monuments of Washington, D.C., and the very design of the city itself. Alexandria, Virginia, 1791. The first U.S. president, George Washington, laid the cornerstone for a 10-mile square diamond matrix that would become the country's new capital, the District of Columbia. Under his thoughtful design, Washington would create not just a capital city, but a permanent tribute to Freemasonry. One that, at the time, only the eye of God could see.
When Pierre Charles L'Enfant and George Washington sat down to design the city of Washington, they were starting from nothing. They were starting from scratch. And they wanted the city to be an absolute, rational, living plan of geometry. They were living the precepts of the Enlightenment. And all of this grew out of Freemasonry, of this fascination with science and logic and philosophy and symbolism. And all of those things came together at the design of Washington, D.C.
No other capital city was designed with the idea that it should reflect through symbolism a philosophy of governance. That's what makes Washington, D.C. unique. How come all of these architects who worked on the White House, the Capitol, were Freemasons?
In 1793, George Washington, clad in full Masonic regalia, presided over the laying of the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol building.
George Washington marched with the Masons from the construction site of the White House up to Capitol Hill, and they set the cornerstone with a silver trowel and placed a silver marker on top of it. It was from that cornerstone that the Capitol grew.
The Capitol became one of America's great monuments to democracy, as its founding fathers intended. But according to historians and researchers, the building's cornerstone is now missing. How? And why?
There are those who say that this mysterious missing cornerstone is hiding secret documents, some strange alternate constitution, other Masonic documents, that it's been carefully hidden away from public view.
Washington and fellow Freemason L'Enfant were also responsible for designing the Federal Triangle, an area with specific geometrical symbols built into the street plans of the Capitol.
I am standing in the middle of America's sacred ground. I have the Washington Monument right behind me, the Statue of Libertas on top of the Capitol Dome to my right. And I have a clear look at the White House from this spot. The Founding Fathers wanted this to be a statement in stone of American values. They wanted to make sure a particular set of doctrines were going to be visible for thousands of years.
Pierre Charles L'Enfant realized that this triangle of three buildings was really key to establishing the new order of America. So therefore, it's central to everything. There are symbols hidden in the layout of Washington, D.C. First, you had a grid, horizontals, verticals. Then you had the streets on angles. When you start laying angles over top of grids, you're going to come up with all kinds of symbols.
Further investigation reveals another occult symbol traced directly into the streets of the city. A pentagram. And its southernmost tip points directly to the White House.
One of the recurrent occult symbols that you'll find within Freemasonry is the pentagram, the five-pointed star.
But why did America's founding fathers weave Masonic symbols into the design and layout of the nation's capital? Were they sending a coded message? And if so, to whom? Colorado, 1995. After years of delays, construction of the Denver International Airport was completed. The largest international airport in America, and the third largest in the world. Above ground, it encompasses 53 square miles, nearly 2 times the size of Manhattan. But below the surface, some believe there is a secret city stretching down into the depths of the earth.
The Denver airport has a cornerstone that was laid by the Freemasons, and it looks like this control panel rising up out of the floor, and it's got braille on it, so it looks almost like they're push buttons, and it's sort of like the control panel for the New World Order. It even says the New World Airport Commission, and there's a big square and compass, and so people have said, well, this is clearly the Freemasons built this place.
Could there really be a secret city hidden below Denver International Airport? And if so, is this where the Freemasons intend to launch their so-called New World Order? Perhaps the writing is literally on the wall.
You have a mural that shows this soldier in a gas mask with a scimitar stabbing a dove, and this endless chain of dying women and babies going out from under it. It's just horrific.
There are scenes of ruination, war, corpses of babies, people fleeing underground, a plague, death, Nazism, dictatorship, the coming of a new world order.
Do the Freemasons believe in a predestined apocalyptic event? And is this what America's founding fathers have been preparing for since the Declaration of Independence? There are those who believe the answer is yes, and some suggest the Masonic view of the future came from another secret society formed in Europe at the time of the American Revolution, the Illuminati.
A university professor named Adam Weishaupt formed a group called the Illuminati, and he set it up to be a very secret society and to operate very secretly. The way it worked was he would talk to one person, that one person would contact one person. And that way, people down the line had no idea who was at the top or how to get to them or what the real purpose was. But somewhere at the top of the heap is somebody who has an agenda.
Historians suggest that the Illuminati had infiltrated Masonic lodges in the United States by the late 1700s, just as its founding fathers were drafting the Constitution. So did the Illuminati, under the guise of Freemasonry, influence the creation of the government and laws of the United States?
In a 1792 letter to a friend, George Washington said he had absolutely no doubts that the doctrines of the Illuminati had spread to the United States. He said, "No one is more assured of this than I am." The most basic tenet of the Illuminati is that the end justifies the means. And this is what makes them so dangerous, because they'll say anything, pose as anything, and yet they cling to their own doctrine.
This is the biggest secret of all in America's Book of Secrets, beyond anything. And the secret of the Freemasons is that there is a coming of a new age. It's a big secret in plain sight.
Freemasonry will always remain the granddaddy of all secret societies, the greatest of all of them, the most international of all of them. And Freemasonry will remain a society that has a very powerful political impact.
Amongst all the conspiracy theories and secrets, some facts are clear. Prominent Freemasons helped spark the American Revolution. They helped create the United States of America. Their influence can be found all across the nation, on important documents, on monuments, and even embedded in the streets of Washington, D.C. They are a brotherhood of secrets, and they will protect those secrets with their lives. But what is the Freemasons' ultimate objective? Perhaps only time will tell.